This past Monday, I was helping out by moderating the session of another congregation in the presbytery. It's one of the ways that we pastors in the PCUSA are asked to live into our ordination vows. We started off our session meeting with a devotion. It's actually the same devotion that I did with our session at DMPC just the week prior. And the practice that I led them in is called Visio Divina. In it, you look at an image 3 times. You reflect on it using different prompts each time. The picture that I chose was this one. It's an image of Times Square, nearly completely empty because of the COVID-19 crisis. One of the members of this church's session had formerly been a deacon. She had served as a deacon for many, many years before becoming an elder. And when I asked, after the prompt of what catches your eyes most in this picture, when I asked what it was that people had paid attention to, she stopped and she said, "You know what I noticed most was the sign, the CDC sign that said, 'Avoid coming into contact with sick people.'" She went on to say, "That's completely counter to what I would normally do, and it's definitely not what Christ did. Christ went out and he touched the lepers, he touched the outcast, he touched those who are sick and potentially contagious. He put his hands on them." And that's usually what I think our call is too. So I'm really struggling with this. What are we supposed to do now? That comment and that question certainly stuck with me this past week, probably because it's what I have been asking myself for the past 6. What are we supposed to do now? What am I supposed to do now? How do I contribute to the effort to fight this virus? How do I provide comfort when I can't touch people? And how do I help those who are truly struggling with the current desperate economic times? Doctors and nurses and hospital staff, they have their place. They're saving people's lives. Chaplains are putting their lives on the line in order to provide the spiritual care that people need most. Researchers are working around the clock in order to come up with good treatments and effective measures at combating this virus. Childcare workers are helping out by caring for essential employees' children. Emergency personnel are stepping into the worst of situations. Governmental employees are working around the clock to make sure that our governmental infrastructure, our cities, are running safely and effectively. And then there are the grocery, the bulk, and the hardware store employees, the stock room workers, the warehouse people, the truck drivers, the delivery personnel. And that list just goes on and on. They are all acting in heroic ways. What could I possibly do? But there was actually another thing that stuck with me this week. Hours before that session meeting, I had led our morning prayer group at DMPC in the act of Lectio Divina. It's the prayer practice that we do every week. And it is, instead of looking at a picture 3 times, it's the act of looking at scripture 3 times, reading it through meditatively, and each time listening for something different that stands out to us. This week, and almost every week, we read the lectionary text that I knew I was going to be preaching on, which was Acts 3, verses 1 through 10. And I have to admit, I don't think that I have read Acts 3, verses 1 through 10 for quite some time, a few years at least. It's admittedly, Acts is not my favorite book of the Bible. And what really hit me in this exchange between Peter and John and the unnamed beggar was some of the wording around their first encounter. Peter and John stared intently or gazed intently at this man. And then the man in turn fixed his attention on the 2 apostles. There is such intensity in this interaction. There's such intimacy in this interaction. There is this back and forth, this act of seeing, and then this act of being seen. And then Peter says this, I don't have silver or gold, but what I have, I give you. That exchange, that interaction, those words, that's the other thing that stuck with me this week. The apostles start by paying attention. Instead of just tossing a coin in this man's direction and then walking on, as I'm sure many, many people had done before, they take the time to stop and to look and to truly see this man where he is. And then comes the admission, the confession. I don't have silver or gold. I don't have the thing that everyone else is giving. I don't have that. But it's quickly followed by this other act of truth telling. I do have something. I do have. There are other gifts that I can offer. And what I do have, I will give you. It's a process, this thing that happens between the apostles and this man. It's the process of first paying attention, and then second, an assessment of what they don't have and an admission of that. Third, an assessment and a confession of what they do have. And then there is the offering itself. And to that man in that situation, that process gave him life and life abundant. These two events from Monday jostled around in my head this week. What can I do? Peter, John, and the beggar. They kept actually crashing into each other. And then I got this somewhat mysterious package in the mail. Now, it wasn't mysterious as in suspicious. It was mysterious as in, I know I've been actually doing online shopping recently, but I wasn't expecting to get anything today. So what on earth is this thing? When I opened it, though, I actually knew exactly what it was. I had forgotten that a couple of weeks prior, a really good friend of mine in California had said that she was going to buy this thing for me and this thing for her. And there it was. And what it was that she had ordered was a pack of KN95 masks. Now, KN95 masks are pretty much exactly the same as N95 masks, those ones that we have been hearing so much about in the news, the ones that doctors are using. The only difference is they are made in China. And as far as doctors are concerned, they protect the same, they just fit differently. Here was personal protective equipment, or PPE, that had just shown up at my doorstep. What can I do? Thinking about Peter and John and the way that they had paid attention to that beggar reminded me of a conversation that I had had just the Friday prior. He was working from 4 a.m. to 11 p.m., he told me. He hadn't seen his significant other in many, many weeks, and he wasn't sure when he was going to be able to see her again. He wanted to protect her from everything that he was experiencing in the hospital. And then he said that they were all reusing their PPE at Hopkins, which is where he works. They weren't sure what was going to happen coming up. They weren't sure when their supplies would run out. As tired as I had been that morning, I guess I had paid attention, at least a little bit, to what he had said when I asked him how he'd been doing. So when those masks showed up in the mail, I knew what I could do. I could reach out to him. The truth is, there is a lot that I feel like I don't have right now. I'm not a medical provider. I don't have that expertise. I don't have the certification to be a chaplain or a truck driver. I've never worked at a grocery store. I've never stocked a warehouse. And on top of that, I really don't have the resource of time. I really don't. Nor do I have a whole lot in the way of energy. It turns out 16-month-olds tend to be vampires when it comes to both the time and the energy piece of life. And honestly, what I don't have is really what I've been focusing on. It has made me feel overwhelmed. It's made me feel powerless. And honestly, it's made me feel pretty guilty. Like I'm not doing my part or I'm not a good disciple. It is a scarcity mindset, pure and simple. Reading Acts 3 challenged me to move beyond this idea of scarcity. Yes, Peter and John admit what they do not have. For me, that's the easy part most of the time. But Peter and John don't get stuck there. They don't get bogged down in that. Instead, they move right along to what I do have, I give you. They move right along to their sense of abundance. And in reality, let's be honest, all they had to offer was a phrase, words, and a hand, an outstretched hand to help this man up. That's it. But in that moment, through the power of God, those two simple things meant life for this man. There is a lot that I don't have, but this week I did have 25 KN95 masks, and I did have the capacity to go to the post office. And I did, in fact, have the capacity to give blood, another thing that has been on my mind recently. I did have the capacity to pay attention to what my doctor had already told me, and I did have the capacity to pay attention to those commercials that have been on TV from the American Red Cross. And so what I did have, I gave. What can I do? What can we do? I know I'm not the only one asking those questions right now. And I doubt that I am the only one trapped in this scarcity mindset. Yet I have seen incredible ways that all of you are offering out of your abundance. It's easiest for me to talk about Lauren, perhaps because she's the one I live with, so I see it every day. I've heard her on the phone, in fact, just this past week, talking to a local food bank on the Eastern Shore, and she asked them this question: what do you need most right now? She offered them her attention because her company had the resources, because they're backed by the Mitsubishi Corporation, to offer money to community organizations in the communities where they work. What Lauren had was that employer and the contacts to make those donations possible. I've also seen Adina and Essie giving of their time to provide childcare for parents who might go insane without it, like us. I've seen Homer give of her time, not just with music, just like Essie doesn't just give of her creativity when it comes to worship. But Homer has also given of her talent in teaching ESOL by starting to set up online courses for those who might need to learn English most right now. I've seen Greg give of his time to help keep the Scouts running. And I've seen Mo give of her passion when it comes to foster children, whom she is still checking in on now in this time. I've seen Lynn and Kathy and Diane give of their compassion in reaching out. I've seen Julie and Lisa and Susan and Lisa and Rick and Mel and Garland and Jeff and so many others giving of their hearts by making phone calls to our members. I've seen Winnie giving of her drawing talents. I've seen Suzanne give of her worship leadership, and Hollis and Mary and Jerry giving of their encouragement. I've seen Marcia giving of her passion for and energy for mission. I've seen Martin and Amanda give of their time in order to serve their students better. I know that I can't list each and every one of you right now, and I really am sorry for that. But I want each of you to know that I see you, and I see the ways that you are giving out of your abundance, that you are acknowledging what you do have and offering it to this world. I have seen you in doing that offer life, just like Peter and John did. I imagine that we're still going to be asking the question, what can we do? What can I do? I imagine that we're still going to feel overwhelmed and powerless and even guilty from time to time. I imagine that we're even going to fall back into the mindset of scarcity. It's going to happen. But let's do our best not to stop there. Let's do our best to follow Peter and John and move forward to what we do have, to that place of abundance. Let's do our best to ask, what do I have? And let's also encourage each other to ask that question and to see our abundance. And then let's answer the question of what can I do by saying, what I have, I give you. Trusting that through the power of the Spirit of resurrection, by what we have and what we offer, God will bring life and life abundant. So may it be for us.